I'm joining a call from home this evening. City Clerk Juliana Pinnick, City Administrator Chris Engel, and Assistant City Administrator Meredith Houck are at their own workspaces within City Hall, and council members and other staff are joining remotely. Public comment for this meeting was accepted in advance by mail and email. These comments will be read into the public record shortly. I would like to submit if you would like to submit a public comment for our next meeting, please visit www.merriam.org and follow the instructions listed there. As a reminder to City Council, please be conscientious of others trying to speak. Speak slowly and clearly, and state your name prior to speaking. If I need to confirm something that may have been difficult to hear, I will ask for clarification. The format for the council consideration on items tonight will be staff presentation. Then I will open up a time for council questions. Please hold your questions until the end of staff presentation. What I'm going to do now is ask for our city clerk to please call the roll.
Mayor Sism.
Here.
Councilmember DeVold.
Here.
Councilmember Hands.
Here.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Here.
Councilmember Knapp.
Here.
Councilmember Neal.
He's absent tonight.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Pape.
Here.
Councilmember Silvers.
Here.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Here.
Very good. We're going to move to public items or public comments section. And Julie, would you please read any public comments that were submitted in advance into the record?
Yes, we actually have 3 public comments tonight. Our first public comment is from Sam Mateer, 8515 West 57th Street. His comment is as follows. We all know that city sales tax revenues are going to plunge for an extended period. Unfortunately, over half of Merriam's revenue comes from sales and use taxes. When the COVID-19 lockdown is lifted, there will be a short burst of economic activity from pent-up demand, and the growth could slow to a snail's pace. An estimated 1/4 of small businesses will not reopen. Those that do reopen may have to close after federal funds are exhausted. All cities have 3 choices. 1, carry debt longer, or 2, cut expenses, or 3, raise the mill levy to increase city revenue from property taxes. Residents will not tolerate a mill levy increase, especially since home property taxes are already rising due to increased property appraisals, and many residents will continue to be out of work because their jobs aren't coming back. Cutting expenses is the most logical alternative and will require right sizing for government for a city our small size with 11,000 residents, 5,200 households, in a 4 square mile area. Start cutting non-essential expenses today. As an example, we can cancel the $316,000 purchase of 78 LED street lamps and postpone purchasing new vehicles for the foreseeable future, and stop building new sidewalks. Right sizing is to begin now. City governments that cut expenses immediately will be in much better shape than those that wait. Merriam residents will look back on this day and see how future expenses were managed by their elected representatives on April 13th, 2020. Okay. That was the first public comment. I have the second public comment from John Sandin. He lives at 6812 Wed Street. I have a concern that I would like to see addressed at the council meeting tonight. There is a sign in the yard at 6816 Wed advertising a church. I was told that the sign has been deemed acceptable, but I would like to know the criterion for an acceptable advertisement versus an unacceptable advertisement. There are many more effective and appropriate advertising media available, so the reasoning becomes even more puzzling. I fear that this will become an open door to a signage trend throughout our neighborhood, which is zoned residential. Which types of churches are given an exemption? Are mosques included? People on this block are attempting to sell their homes and now have a potential deal killer visible in their neighborhood. And if signage is allowed and expands, there will be more. Thank you for your attention to this. And then I have a final public comment from Billy Crone, 6633 Wed Street. I would like to thank our city council, the mayor, and staff for finding a way to continue to meet safely in the face of our current situation to serve our community. Tonight, you will consider renewing a 5% franchise fee that Merriam government imposes on Evergy, formerly KCP&L. Evergy passes this fee directly to Merriam residents. So it is, in effect, not a tax on Evergy, but a tax on Merriam families. The very same families whom you've called upon to give up their previous way of life and ability to generate income weeks ago by staying home to flatten the curve. I'm aware of the program for refunding fees to those on a limited income who ask for it. But I would ask that you take this opportunity today to give financial relief to all Merriam residents by suspending the franchise fee for at least as many months as people have been out of work due to COVID, without asking them all to come begging you for relief one by one. Indeed, I think it's probably the fairest thing to do to suspend most taxation for as long as people are asked to abstain from leaving their home to be productive. Without this reciprocity, which can begin by your motion tonight, I feel you will unnecessarily add to the pressure Merriam families already feel to choose between their well-being and their financial obligations. Please carry this concern with you as other matters of taxation arise during stay-home orders. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Hearing those three, we'll move from that onto our consent agenda. And all items listed under the heading are considered to be routine by the city council, may be enacted in one motion. There's no separate discussion of these items unless, of course, the council member so requests, in which case that item is removed from the consent agenda and considered separate. The items on the consent agenda this evening are: number 1, consider approval of the minutes of the city council meeting held March 9th, 2020. Number 2, consider approval of a pool use agreement with the city of Mission. And number 3, consider approval of a resolution honoring the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Would any member of the council like any of these items removed? Mr. Pate?
Mayor, just as a clarification, I was not at the last council meeting when the approval of the minutes, but it's my understanding that we don't have to pull that from the consent agenda for me to vote for that. Is that correct?
That's correct. You can approve it by its form.
By its form.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. I don't need to remove it. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that clarification when they saw that I was not there and I was approving that.
That's correct. Is it not, Mr. Engel? Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to remove any of these items?
I do, please.
Okay, which item?
The pool agreement, number 2.
Okay, very good. We'll remove item number 2. Anything further? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead. I'll entertain or receive a motion for items number 1 and 3 and a second.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move the council approve consent agenda items 1 and 3.
I'll
One, three.
second it.
Motion made and seconded. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember DeBold,
Aye.
Councilmember Hans,
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell,
Aye.
Councilmember Knapp,
Aye.
Councilmember Pape,
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers,
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Very good. Items 1 and 2 have passed, and we'll move to item number 2, which is, I may have said 1 and 2, I meant 1 and 3. Item number 2 is consider approval of the pool use agreement with the City of Mission. You have some questions, Councilwoman Hans?
Yes, I just have one. It's more not specifically about the Mission one, but if we're mirroring the one from Roland Park, I'm just wondering if the contingency about COVID-19, which is section 6, I believe, if we're going to go back and revisit that at some point.
I'm gonna allow Anna to talk. Anna, I'm turning on your audio. I think I am anyway. I am attempting to unmute you. Anna? Okay, you're unmuted.
Okay, perfect. It was a joint combination between the two of us. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So, Councilman Hans, if I understood your question correctly, the COVID-19 piece that's in the mission agreement is also going to be included in the Roland Park agreement.
So that's a cleanup item we'll do later.
In regards to, we're not looking at Roland Park right now. They have not agreed officially. This is only for mission right now.
Okay, I thought we already approved one of them.
No, we have not approved any. This is the first one before you. We talked about where the conversation was at, but once the COVID-19 piece came into play, we added that to both agreements.
Great. That answers my question. I'd be happy to make a motion if you want me to do that.
Please do.
Mr. Mayor, I move that council approve the interlocal agreement with the City of Mission as presented.
I'll second.
Second. We have a motion and a second, Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Hans,
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell,
Aye.
Councilmember Knapp,
Aye.
Councilmember Pape,
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers,
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold.
Aye.
Very good. That motion passes. We'll be next moving into Finance and Administration. And the format for consideration of the rest of our agenda items will be as follows. The staff will make a presentation regarding the item, followed by the council. The council is asked to hold all questions until the end of that presentation. Once the presentation is over, I will ask council for questions. We will answer questions one at a time. Please indicate if you have a question by raising your hand, and don't forget to state your name before you begin speaking. I will note that the February finance report, the monthly community center update, and the monthly CIP update were included in the packet as information-only items, and there will not be any formal a formal presentation on these items during the meeting tonight. First item is consider approval of a notice of electors form for the Evergy Metro Franchise Ordinance. Go ahead and take it away.
Okay. The item before you tonight, consider approval of the notice of electors form for Evergy Metro Inc. The city has a franchise agreement with Kansas City Power and Light, which is now Evergy. While the current agreement did expire in 2020, we are still in effect with the agreement, as the attorney has been negotiating with Evergy to get the new franchise ordinance. As part of the agreement process, the city is required to provide a notice of electors of the city that the city council would be considering such ordinance. This is noticed by publishing in our city's official newspaper, which is the Legal Record of Johnson County. The city council has to approve this form of notice. The notice basically states the term and the rate of the proposed agreement. So the rate will be 5%, which is the typical rate that it's been for many years, and the term will be 10 years. As well, the final date for consideration will be at the May 11th City Council meeting. So this is just the first step in this franchise agreement process. And in the action form, it did list the timeline, which tonight we would approve the form. It gets published on the 21st. Then the 27th, we'll have a first reading. And then at the May 11th, then the council would consider it for its second reading and final approval. And with that, I answer any questions that I can.
Mr. Silvers?
Yeah, I had one quick question. Excuse me. Since we've been discussing sustainability in the city of Merriam, can we make sure that there's a provision in place to encourage fair collaboration between Evergy and residents who install solar panels?
I had a similar question too.
Okay.
So I second Jason's question.
Sure. I may defer to our city attorney for that question. He is the one that has been working with the Evergy to get the franchise agreement. This is simply the notice process. So if he wants to jump in.
Sure. So Kansas state law already provides that by statute that any electric utilities have to recognize and honor individual homeowners who have solar panels. That's a net metering statute. So if they generate electricity, they're required by state statute to permit the selling back of any excess usage or any excess power that's generated by solar panels at their home back to, in this case, Evergy. And the reason it's a net metering is because during the winter months, you may not generate as much electricity as compared to the summer months. You may generate excess energy, and so they ultimately look at the net of what you generate and sell back to the grid versus what you generate and use on site at your own home.
You mind
Does
if
that
I
make
ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, yeah, follow up. Good.
Yeah. This is Whitney Yadrich. I know we're supposed to say our name before we speak. Municipally, or I guess as a city, do these franchise fees include the ability to negotiate connection fees to the grid for solar customers? So currently, I won't say anything specific because I don't know exactly what the facts are in that, but I would want to make sure that people who do choose to connect to the solar grid are doing so at the same cost without additional fees. Does that make sense? Is that something that we have the power to negotiate through a franchise agreement?
I can look into it. My gut reaction on that is no. The terms by which Evergy, in this case, which is now kind of a combination between Westar and KCP&L, the terms by which they provide their customers and the everything down to the rate that they're permitted to charge, to connection fees, all of that is determined by the KCC, the Kansas Corporation Commission. So Any changes to those various fees have to go. There has to be an application, and then the application has to go before the KCC. And the KCC is supposed to look out for the customer because, by the very nature of electric service provision, I mean, it's a monopoly. So they really look at the true cost of the various services provided, and they have rate hearings, public rate hearings at which issues like this are decided. So I believe, and I can look into it further, but I believe that all of that is determined uniformly throughout KCP&L's, and in this case now Evergy's service territory. But I can look into it further.
Appreciate it. I think just as a comment too, this may be a good opportunity for us to explore that sustainability goal that we have once we see a first reading or a first draft in full.
Mr. DeBold?
Just in regards to Mr. Cook's comments, is our decision this evening, that doesn't affect any future give back to our community. This is just a formal setup, so because we know eventually we're going to keep franchise fees. Is that correct?
Yes, the item before you right now is just simply to put a notice in the legal record so that the public knows what we're doing with it. This is not the agreement. We can look into some of these things, and we would have to go back to Evergy and perhaps renegotiate. But yeah, we are not making anything. We're not setting any concrete policy tonight other than to post the notice in the paper.
Thank you.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I'd like to ask Mr. Engel to maybe expound upon this notion that we could somehow decide not to charge Evergy 5% and then give that money back to the residents. And that's not the way it works, but you kind of explain how that works, because if we decide not to charge it 5%, they just don't have to pay us 5%. It's not going to get back to anybody, because that's just money they won't have to spend. And I think there may be a miscommunication or maybe a misunderstanding for how that works.
Sure. Franchise fees generally are right-of-way usage fees. It's really to pay for the work that gets done in the city's right-of-way, so that the city can continue to maintain those spots. Just as a point of reference, the KCP&L / Evergy franchise fee generated $850,000 last year. The majority of that paid by commercial businesses, not so much residential, because commercial are bigger users of energy. We have a franchise fee rebate, so if the council wanted to find some way to provide relief to our residents, my suggestion would be we find some way to do that through the franchise fee rebate, where we would just take whatever limits we had on there. That would be one way to do it, but I don't think that we could negotiate this to have a zero franchise fee and then go back 6 months later, 3 months later, 2 months later, and say, oh, wait a minute, we'd like to put the 5% back on, if that answers your question.
It does, but I think my larger point, well, let me ask you this question. What does the city do with them besides maintaining the right of way? What does the city do with any excess money that we receive on franchise?
Pays public works to put lights in the right of way. So it doesn't just pool, it pays for operations.
Right, and if we weren't taking in that money, obviously that would be money we would not have to spend on some of these things, which could, not that it necessarily would, but it could cause us to have to raise taxes to make up that difference. Isn't that correct?
We could raise taxes, or it would impact service levels. Those would be options.
So making the claim that the 5% was just passed on to the consumer and by way of tax, that's certainly one way of looking at it. But if we don't receive the money, we may have to do the same thing. It's always been confusing in some sense, but it's something that's been going on for many, many years, and it's, of course, most is controlled by state law, and we like to think we have some impact on these agreements, but in reality, they pretty much are written for us because the law prescribes them to say so many things. There's very little that we can do with them. That's been my,
Yeah, correct. That is correct.
okay.
Mayor, can I interrupt for 1 moment, please? Bruce, it looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. The revenues from the franchise fees go into the general fund? Is that correct?
Yes, they go in the general fund.
Okay.
Also, I guess for Meredith's information, I can only see a handful of council members, but not all of them. So if somebody's raised their hand, I may not be able, they may not be on the screen at the time. So thanks for helping.
That's okay. I'll watch it for you too.
Okay, do we have any other questions about the franchise agreement? Okay. If there are no other questions, I will now accept a motion for this item. Please state your name when you make the motion or second, and then the city clerk will take a roll call. So,
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
this is Chris Hands, and I move that the council approve the notice to electors form for the Effigy Metro Incorporated franchise ordinance.
Mayor, this is Bob Pape, and I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Caldwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Knapp,
Aye.
Councilmember Pape,
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers, Councilmember Yodrich,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold,
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Very good. The next item is the 2020 budget update. Chris, would you please provide a staff update on this item?
We've got a janitorial contract, I believe, next, Mayor, number 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped it. Let's try this one. Anna, would you please provide staff an update on the consideration for approval of the contract for the janitorial service?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you this evening is a contract with Citywide. They currently have the janitorial contract with all of our other city facilities, City Hall, Fire Department, Police, Public Works, and Historic Plaza. We took that out to bid several years ago in 2018, and they are on a 1-year extension every year. So at this point, we chose not to take it out to bid, but took the agreement to them to ask what they would charge us to clean the Merriam Community Center. Originally, these duties had been rolled into the facility maintenance division, but as we've gotten to understand the floor plan of the facility and the maintenance required, we felt that it would be best to have this done contractually in the evening when the building is closed, with a facility maintenance worker helping us out during the daytime. So before you is the contract, which is the requested contract amount is $132,000 annually. The building is slated to be cleaned 7 days a week, with the exception of 3 days when the facility is closed. A detailed service agreement is included in the contract outlining what the contractor will do for these fees. Because this wasn't considered in the 2020 budget 18 months ago, we are proposing that this be paid out of general fund contingency. As you are aware, the community center budget for construction is $36.6 million, and it is currently under budget. So staff is stating that, predicting that that money will, the unused portion will drop into contingency, and so it will be available to use to help pay for this contract. So I will address any questions that you might have.
Do we have any questions regarding this issue? Looks like we got a few. Let's go with Jason first.
So my question is, when the new community center was proposed years ago, and even back a year ago, how was this not part of the original budget or brought up before we voted for the membership fee? Because the problem I'm having is I feel like we're getting information slowly dripped to us, and it's it could, that involves money, and it might have affected other votes that I have voted yay on, knowing that additional funds would be needed to pay for this facility. So I'm just curious how this wasn't seen as something that needed to be brought up and paid for earlier than this point.
Well, originally we had planned for facility maintenance to be included in the budget. And so it was originally wrapped into that division. And as we've understood and unraveled the facility maintenance division's piece of this, it became evident that the workload was not equally distributed and it wasn't going to be maintained at that level. So when we started talking about some of the fees for the community center, we focused on salaries of staff and other expenses, and this was somewhat wrapped into that. But until we could kind of put all of this together with citywide, we didn't know exactly what that dollar amount was going to be. And they couldn't really give us a bid until they had a better understanding of the building either.
And I will take, if this is Chris, I will take some of the responsibility for that. As we tried to work our way through what made the most sense in terms of facility maintenance people during the day, maintenance people being there at night to clean the facility, I just wasn't comfortable pulling the trigger until, well, we pulled the trigger probably about a month and a half ago on this. It's just been a while since we've met. But the issue is trying to figure out how can, if you're going to clean that place 7 days a week, that's really more than one employee. And once you get into multiple employees and you're chasing sick time and vacation time, it really became an issue of, when we first open, do we want to chase these employees down, or should we just expand the existing contract we have? So that was really something that I just didn't make the decision on, to be honest with you. It was something that we knew that was in the hopper. We have been discussing for several months. I just did not pull the trigger on it. But we could have had this, to answer your question, we probably could have had this conversation several months ago. It was just something I struggled with.
And just as a follow-up, thank you, by the way. Just as a follow-up, when I was reading through the packet, it does sound like they're going to be providing the machinery and cleaning supplies and all those items. So that has to be taken into account if we chose not to go with them, but hire someone full-time. So in a way, they're bringing a lot to the table. Is that correct?
Go ahead,
sorry.
Ann.
I was just going to answer his question. That is correct. They are providing all the necessary floor machines. And since the building is a lot of sealed and polished concrete, as well as what they call LVT, luxurious vinyl tile, it's going to require some pretty large floor machines, excuse me, because you don't hand mop those areas. So those machines alone have quite a significant price tag to them, in addition to other equipment that they'll be bringing in to help maintain this facility.
And if I could add, this will be something clearly that we will look at from time to time. There'll be a cost benefit that we have to look at as we go through the years. This was just something that for the initial year that we thought that this would make the most sense. But this will be something we're going to have to review because it is a chunk of change. But again, with the supplies, with the fact that you don't have to worry about people calling in sick and people that take vacation and backfilling that and paying overtime, I mean, potentially we would have to have 3 people to do that position. So as we did the math on it, this seemed fair enough. But it is something we are going to have to evaluate from year to year, likely as we review our citywide contract for all our other facilities.
This is Whitney Aldrich. May I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, and then after you're done, we'll have Christine do next.
Oh, sorry, I had to jump the line. So I just want to be clear as to why the money for the contract is coming from the general fund contingency instead of the contingency for the community center budget, because we are saying that's under budget and it feels like this is community center exclusive. And so to my brain, it would logically make sense to put that under the contingency for this, but because it's a year-to-year evaluation deal, is that what makes the decision as to what fund this comes out of?
Well, what happens is this is an operating expense. It's not a construction expense. So because of it being an operational expense, it needs to come out of general fund contingency. It's not directly related to the project. So the project contingency would be if when we were excavating and we ran into more rock, we needed to dig into that contingency for that. So that's the difference in why it's funded.
Because it's going to be like an annual operating cost.
That is correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's clear so we know that we're not going over budget or, pulling from Peter,
That is correct.
To pay Paul. That's the phrase I was looking for. All right, thank you.
Christine, you had a question?
By our friend Billy Crone, that in the anti-discrimination section 7, that we don't reference our own ordinance about sexual orientation and gender identification. It just talks about the Kansas rules, I think. So I'm wondering why we don't have that starting to be in our standard templates.
We just haven't yet. Yeah, we can add that in there. It's just, it's not in, we haven't put it in the standard template yet.
Okay, I figured this was a reprise of what they already had going. So I would like to start seeing that show up. Okay.
We can address it.
Is there anyone else? Bob, let me try you next, and then Bruce, you can be after Bob. Turn on your mic, Bob.
Oh, well, let's see. I thought, did you unmic me?
You're on.
Okay. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. My question was, and this is, I know I read the contract, but for those in the audience or other people that might be interested in reference to, this is a 1-year contract, but we talked about that we'd be evaluating this on an ongoing basis, but it's also my understanding that we can get out of this contract with like 30 days notice. Is that correct? If they didn't operate to expectations or we ran into other issues.
Yes,
there's a performance clause in there. I would let me verify, but generally there is.
Okay. And that was just my question, I guess, to let people know that this is not something that goes on forever. If there's issues, we can rectify it.
Yes, there is a termination clause in section 4. It says that we can terminate this agreement at any time for convenience or cause upon a written 30-day written notice to the contractor. If the city terminates the agreement under this section, the city shall pay the contractor for the contract services incurred by the contractor before the termination. Under no circumstances will the contractor be entitled to anticipatory profits or consequential damages. The provisions regarding the indemnity and insurance shall survive the termination of this agreement. So there is a termination clause in the contract.
Thank you. I just wanted that put into the record.
Very good, Bruce.
Yeah, this Bruce Caldwell. My question goes back to the funding of this from the general fund contingency. What did we have in the 2020 facilities maintenance budget for this? If that's where we were planning to clean it, we surely had something.
We had about $6,000 in supplies, and we had originally staffed it with, we originally were going to manage it with staff, so that the staff was shifted to Public Works when we looked at the maintenance. And so then we just were going to clean it with a little bit of money, but we didn't have $132,000 in there for cleaning.
So our original plan was to clean it with existing staff?
Yes. When we first drafted this, and now remember when we did the 2020 budget, that would have been in early 2019. And at that point, we hadn't hired the facility maintenance superintendent. And so it was going to be his team of staff doing it. Well, once we got that person on board and started realizing the time it was going to take to clean this along with the other duties, that's when Chris and I started having the conversations of looking at a contract service to start with.
So this is truly additional expenses beyond what we foresaw that it took. Would that be correct?
I believe we have some percentage of, this is Chris Engel, some percentage of an FTE. I can't see on there, Bruce, but some percentage of an FTE, but we do not have, we have to supplement that in order to clean it at the level that we believe that it needs to be cleaned. Yes.
Okay.
Scott?
It just, to me, it feels like a piece of this should be coming out of the facilities maintenance. Or, yeah, where we had originally planned for it, instead of all of it coming from the general fund.
To address that, the pieces of the FTEs that we don't hire, they reside in the general fund. So that money just doesn't get spent out of the general fund because we will not hire exactly up to the full FTEs that were approved, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, Scott, did you have a question?
Yes, sir. This is Scott Diebold. Back to the non-discrimination ordinance that Mr. Cook sent an email out to us all. Maybe somebody can help me with this. He said in section 7 of that contract, section 7G, G talks about our code compliance for that. So isn't that referenced in this contract already?
Chapter 35, Article 3.
Yeah, so it talks about going, it talks about referencing and complying with Chapter 35, Article 3 of our code, which is our non-discrimination ordinance. Am I correct? So it's already in the contract, is it not?
Good catch.
Yes.
Maybe we could change that and rather than referencing that by code only, put the name of that.
Clarify it. Yeah, maybe clarify it or something. That
way it'll be in there.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Any other questions, Mr. Jason?
Yes, I just have one more follow up to my first question. Does the city see any, or are you currently talking about any other additional members, employees, services that we need to know about now before we vote on this?
I am not currently foreseeing anything. Nothing is on my radar as we move forward. We are wrapping up final operational plans and policies and procedures, and this was the last piece of the puzzle for the operational standpoint from a staffing perspective.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
It looks like Whitney has her hand up.
Okay, Whitney.
I'm looking for, so if that staff were to come out of the general fund anyway, I'm looking at the budget. I have multiple screens like the Matrix going on up here. And I'm looking for maybe I'm looking in the wrong section. I'm looking at general fund budget by line item. And so I was just looking for where that total would have come from. But if you can just point me in the right direction, then I can find that.
there should be an FTE page in the budget.
So I want to go to department, not line item.
The line item, it would just be under I don't know exactly what you're
Personal
looking at,
services
but
or
it
whatever.
would be
Yeah.
under personnel cost. If you're just looking for FTE counts, somewhere page
Page
50-ish.
44. Page 44.
Okay, 44. Somewhere in the first section of the budget, there should be an FTE count.
Aggressively scrolling. Hold on a second. Okay, page 44, FTE count.
And so somewhere in there, you'd have facility, you'd have
Facility
facility
maintenance
attendance,
worker.
you'd have attendance for park and rec. I'm trying to visualize that now.
There's a facility maintenance worker 1 and a facility maintenance worker 2 in
And
our
3.
FTE count on page 45.
And there's a 0 for 3. And then, so the facility maintenance workers are the ones that would be, we're anticipated would be responsible for these.
Yes.
That was who we planned on, yes.
Okay. All right. That answers my question of where they were.
Mr. Pate?
Is it my understanding then that we had planned on 2 FTEs, and with the addition of this contract being let, that we would maybe just have 1 for the daytime use and remove 1 of our FTEs? Am I following that? Or we're still going to have 2 FTEs for maintenance?
We will have, there are FTEs for facility maintenance, but there's only going to be 1 FTE in the Parks Department for facility maintenance, and that will be a Tuesday through Saturday schedule to help during the daytime when we feel like we'll be at our busiest. And then in the facility department or division under Public Works, there are 3 gentlemen in that role.
And refresh, oh, sorry. I'll raise my hand. This is Whitney Aldrich again. Last meeting, we moved a certain percentage of an employee from Public Works to Parks and Rec for this purpose, correct? For the
daytime, yes.
For daytime, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a 0.72.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Yes, yes. And then we reduced 0.28 of another part-time position to create the full-time position.
Okay, so what we're looking at on page 44 is really a 1 and 1, so 2 FTEs, and then you have a single FTE that was amended. Okay.
Anyone else?
I do have another follow-up. I apologize. I don't apologize. I have a follow-up. Did we have the equipment in place to do any of the cleaning, or was that something we still would have had to budget for and purchase if we'd still planned to do the labor ourselves?
If we plan to do the labor ourselves, that would come out of the community center construction budget as equipment needed to be purchased. So we are not purchasing that equipment through the construction budget, because we do not have that equipment here.
Okay. Was that budgeted out, Meredith, in detail, or was it just kind of like a chunk set aside?
No, it was not budgeted in detail. It was a lump sum line item.
Okay. And what was the total of the lump sum line item?
It's, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
It was not, any money that is not spent as part of the community center budget goes back into city contingency.
It would be helpful for me if I just knew like how much of the contingency had been used or hadn't been used, I think.
The community center budget. So as of the middle of last year, we had, middle of last month, we had $1.5 million, or we started with 1.5 million in contingency. We had spent about $300,000, and that's of the city's contingency. McCarthy still has contingency as well.
And that's the design build contingency, and we get all that back too if they don't use it.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, I think we should move on to any other questions before we go for a motion. Okay, if there are no other questions, I will now accept the motion for this item. Please state your name when you make the motion in second. Then the city clerk will take a roll call vote. Mr. Pape?
Yeah, Mayor, this is Bob Pape. I'll move the council approve a contract for janitorial services for the new community center.
I'll second. Scott Diebold, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, Madam Clerk. You're on.
Councilmember Nath.
Try again.
Unmute everybody.
Okay. Councilmember Nath.
Aye.
Councilmember Pape.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Very good. Mr. Engel, I would ask that maybe either in the admin report, if we could somehow formulate an estimate of the cost savings of not hiring applied to the cost of the contract to clean, so the council kind of an idea of what kind of money we're talking extra, maybe a little more closer estimate than what we were able to get tonight, just so they know that there was a increase and how much it is.
Got that, Mayor.
Okay. Next, 2020 budget update. Chris, would you provide staff an update on this item?
Sure. This was an item that just added at the last minute. It's really just a brief 2020 budget update. I've been asked by several council members, folks inside and outside of the organization, to share with them what our crystal ball says in terms of our revenues, and that's a number that's in flux. We just don't know. As you're all aware, the way that sales tax revenue, which is a huge portion of our revenue stream, rolls in about 2 months behind. So the issue is that we won't know for 2 months. However, we do know that we need to do things now. And so since that crystal ball is not that clear, what I clearly do have is a read on what our spending plan is, what was our approved budget for 2020. And so, well, this is going to be clearly a revenue issue. The expenditure side is going to need to come into play on how we balance 2020. Some of the difficulty of creating the 2021 budget is going to come into how we think 2020 is going to end. So what I decided to do was just share just a brief list that, Meredith, if you can bring that up for me, of some spending, really some numbers that hopefully will provide you a little bit of information that we're doing okay. I want to start at the bottom in the middle. As of Friday, we had $10.7 million in the bank. We have about $30 million invested, $10.5 million of which is going to mature this year, usually about monthly. Different amounts come due. You'll find that in the finance report. That's essentially a revenue stream. It's our rainy day fund. It's our fund balance that we keep. But those maturities, we usually, if we don't need them, we reinvest them in some sort of short-term note. But we have the ability to keep those so we can maintain our cash flow, or we can reinvest those. So of that 30 some odd million dollars, 10.5 of it is coming due in 20. So we can convert that to cash easily. So we've got $10.7 million in the bank. We've got about $10.5 million coming due in investments. And then I'll just address some of the things that you'll find in the columns up above. In the general fund, we've just picked out 3 things that we were going to do in there, not just any 3, but three substantial investments we were going to make, and we are pausing those. We potentially could cancel some of them. We could defer some of them to 2021. But for now, we're just going to pause on them. If you look at those top 3, they equal about $93,000. From our equipment reserve fund, we are going to defer purchasing all of those items. So a patrol vehicle, an investigations vehicle, both of those in the police department, some tech upgrades, a trailer in public works, some appliances for the fire station upstairs, as well as a swing set for Chat Lane Park. So in our equipment reserve fund, that's $135,000 worth of approved spending that we're not going to spend. We're just going to sit on that until we figure out till we figure out what's going on. And then in our CIP fund, we've got $272,000 for facade improvements at City Hall. We've got $62,000 left of $650,000 that we budgeted for 5701 Merriam Drive. We've got a Streamway Trail extension for $264,000. And then I put in there community center under budget of the $6 million from CIP that we budgeted to pay for the community center. We're projecting to get back somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000. All those total up to about $2.1 million in deferred spending. If you go back up to the general fund, I've asked the last item up there is an overall reduction to the general fund. I have had all of the department heads work up a 25% reduction in their general fund expenditures just as an exercise. If I was to go and ask for a 15% reduction, that would be an additional $1.5 million in spending that we would have. Again, they've identified about 25% reduction. So that's somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 to $3.5 million on the spending side. That again, essentially all that does is that just buys us time. So what we've done is, as anybody that's been through some budget cycles with us realizes that because of our revenue makeup is so reliant on sales tax, and that sales tax is so reliant on automobiles, that's why we carry huge balances. Well, I don't know if you call them huge, but they are substantial balances. As we've said every year, that's a rainy day fund for today. That's the reason we keep those. We get the benefit of, say, a AAA bond rating by having such high balances, but the reality is that when things like this happen here, it buys us some time. So, well, I don't have a crystal ball. I would say that it's because of the fiscally prudent decisions that we've made over the years to maintain fund balances that we will be afforded some additional time to figure out what makes the most sense. But we are right now, we've frozen all travel and training and all of those budgets. But I mean, to get to the big numbers, we've got to defer some spending. So while we have some time, we're not going to be immune to making any difficult decisions. We will likely have to cut some things from the budget to make 20 balance. So again, this is really just to share that we are identifying how we can balance the year out. Because we don't know what revenues are going to do. We are projecting that they're bottomed out. Well, they're not bottomed out, but they're substantially less this year, and that will continue for several months. But again, these balances and these cash on hand are going to allow us the opportunity to come up with a long-range plan before we have to start really cutting to the bone. That being said, I'm happy to answer any questions about what I've presented here.
If there's any questions from the city council, please raise your hand. Wait to be recognized before speaking, and don't forget to state your name before you ask the question. Any questions?
Looks like Scott has one. And
Oh, okay, Scott.
Again, I'd like to say that it sounds like, and again, we had a public comment at the beginning too. Sounds like that our city staff is doing a pretty good job of looking at what's going to happen, with not knowing what's going to happen, and looking at what we can do. So I just want to say to Chris and staff that you guys done a great job with that, and looking at the things that we could actually eliminate, and not limit or eliminate any services, things like that, that our citizens count on. In some of those cases, but it might a little bit. But again, I want to congratulate you guys for doing that, for taking the time and looking at it, so they can answer some questions that were presented early in this meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the message that the staff has received, the finance staff and all the department heads, is that right now what we're really trying to do is we're trying to focus our resources on maintaining core services. I mean, there are things that we're not doing right now. There's things that we've canceled, but we recognize that this is not just going to be a revenue solution. This is going to be an expenditure solution also. So,
Bob?
This is Bob Pape. That's basically, I just want to echo what Councilman DeBold said. I know coming from staff how hard that must have been, an exercise for them to try to reduce 25% or at least 15% of their budget. But the fact that you did that, I think is a great testament to the city looking at this seriously and staff trying to do everything they can to curtail expenditures. And that's, I just want to make that statement. Thank you.
Anyone else? Christine?
Hansen, yes, I agree. I'm not at all surprised that you've already looked at all of this, and I like that you're sharing it with us. This is pretty horrible situation for everybody, but good to know we're in good hands. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'd like to just remind everyone, not that I necessarily need to, that, and that's also from being a staff member and department head for many years, a lot of these changes, these savings are deferred purchases. These are, we may be deciding not to buy a police car this year, and that doesn't mean we're never going to be able to replace it. It's going to be replaced next year or the year after, and it's going to be older. We're going to, and that there are certain costs that go along with those kinds of things. Now, these are mostly deferred purchases. I don't want to give anybody the impression that we can simply reduce our expenditures by 15% without any problems. There's sacrifices in nearly all of these reductions, but we do have the leeway to make these changes. So, and I'm certainly hoping, and I have no reason to believe that we're not going to recover from this. Things will start to normalize soon, and we'll see some relief. We just don't know how long that will be or how deep the cuts will be, and that's kind of what we're preparing for now. So I echo the remarks, but just something to think about. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, let's take this to Community Development and Public Works. First item is consider approval of a development agreement with the Kincaid Group, DS Bus Lines. Brian, you want to provide staff update on this item?
Evening, Mayor, council members. Brian Dyer, Community Development Director. Yeah, this item before you this evening is a development agreement between the City of Merriam and Kincaid Group. Kincaid Group's the folks who own DS Bus Line. The purpose of this development agreement is to define and map out who's responsible for improvements at the intersection of West 55th Street and Merriam Drive. DS Bus Lines has approached the city about turning that into a four-legged intersection, fully signalized, with the eastern leg being a private drive, a private entrance for their buses. A little bit of history about this. Some of you all may know the Kincaid Group originally started the bus line in Merriam, down on Merriam Drive. However, they sold it to First Student, and then just recently, back in 2017, they bought the business back. And since they bought, they've been doing a number of improvements down there, including the purchasing of 5501 Merriam Drive, the old Williker Tow lot. When they purchased the lot, they tore down the building and started doing some improvements on the site. They've started doing improvements also in doing interior traffic of the buses, the interior movement of the buses. They've been working hard on that, as well as they are now underway the expansion of the office building at one location. Kincaid Group came to the city in 2018 and approached us about this project. At that time, we informed them that the property that they wanted to utilize for the private entrance is owned by Johnson County Parks and Recreation District, and we instructed them that they need to begin working with the district in regards to getting that piece of property. They have been doing that, and just this year, back in February, they received an access easement from Johnson County Parks and Rec District for the purposes of installing the private drive. Also, as part of that, I think everybody understands that they also have to move the trail a little bit further to the north. So they've also been in discussions with the city as well as the Parks and Rec, Johnson County Parks and Rec about that. Also, they've been working since 2018 on a conceptual design on the driveway. Obviously, the city has some interest in it. We want to make sure that if anybody were to mistakenly go down that drive, they'd be able to turn around and get out. So we've been working with them during that time. And the conceptual design, the design that's attached to this agreement, is something that city staff as well as the city engineer reviewed and approved. I would like to point out that this evening is simply the development agreement. If any additional improvements that they plan to do to the parking lot that's to the south have to be done by a site plan, which will also need a city review. So we're just talking about the development agreement for that driveway. That's not to say that if they would decide after this agreement, if this agreement is approved, they would decide to construct the private drive. They would simply need whole building permits and right-of-way permits to get that, to construct that private drive. Also, at the same time, when we were working on the design, this city staff requested, and Kincaid did, a traffic study for Merriam Drive with the full intersection. Traffic study showed that the improvements that they're being proposed did not have any negative effects on Merriam Drive. And so we continue going forward with the project, and we're here seeing it with the development agreement. The development agreement details responsibilities between the city and Kincaid Group. It is a 2-year agreement with 2 1-year extensions, so they could possibly go for a total of 4 years. The agreement says that Kincaid Group will be responsible for the installation and cost of the following items: relocating the Turkey Creek Streamway Trail, all equipment, engineering that's associated with making the intersection into a four-legged traffic signalized intersection. Improvements need to be made to the east side, ADA improvements that need to be made to the east side of the intersection, and then also the private drive that will be leading down into their parking lot. Once this is completed, the Kincaid Group, once they complete the private drive, the Kincaid Group will be responsible for the maintenance of the private drive and the Johnson County Parks and Recreation easement area. And then the city will be responsible for the maintenance of Turkey Creek as well as the public improvements that are located on the right-of-way. We see a lot of positives that could come out of the construction of this 4-legged intersection. We make a safer entrance into the DS bus lines for their buses. Hopefully we reduce the amount of bus queuing that occurs on Merriam Drive. And then we'll also get an ADA compliant ramps and crosswalk on the eastern leg. Staff recommends approval of this development agreement, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that council has.
Any questions? Whitney.
I lost the little raise hand button. This is Whitney Outrich. What's the anticipated amount of time that the trail would not be, would it just be fully disconnected and not usable in that area during construction, or would there be kind of a detour?
We have talked with them, discussing them that we anticipate will require that the trail be relocated as soon as possible. So it would be before construction started. However, with that caveat being that obviously during construction of the driveway, there may be time that the trail will still be closed. Now, what we have also asked for them is that to provide us with plenty of leeway and time to give us notice when they plan to start construction. Obviously, Ms. Slocum's team needs a lot of time to get the word out that there's going to be a detour and stuff like that. So we don't have an anticipated timeline for how long it'll be closed at this point in time. But obviously, like I said, Kincaid will be giving the city plenty of notice, and we'll be posting it out there and getting the message out there that the trail is closed as soon as we get knowledge that they're going forward with the project.
Okay, great, cool. I just wanted to make sure, like, I would hate to be a mom in a stroller or be riding my bike and then all of a sudden just be like, there's, not an easy, safe way to get past it. So as long
Right,
as we
right.
have that information in advance, it'd be good to have.
Any other questions?
Mayor, it looks like Jason's hand is up.
Scott, you're next. Jason?
I actually have a couple of quick questions. The first one has to do with the actual traffic caused by this. I'm looking at the schematic right now, and can you tell me, are the buses going to be able to turn from the curb lane into the new drive without impeding the second lane of traffic going in that same direction? Are they gonna have to do a wide turn and block traffic from going past buses turning right into the new parking lot?
This is the design by the Kincaid Group's team. So I would assume that they have made the radius of the curbs more than adequate to handle their buses.
Okay. And then my last question is based on the drawing again. It looks like besides, it sounds like they're going to be asphalting what is currently a gravel parking lot, but it looks like runoff is going to be directed towards the end of that entrance down into the creek. Am I reading that incorrectly?
No, most likely that's exactly what's going to happen, yes.
So we're most likely getting rid of a permeable parking surface and adding more water into the creek that's already having flood issues.
I would say that the gravel probably has a runoff coefficient very similar to the asphalt. The amount of water that's coming off this into the creek is probably going to be very close to being the same. However, when they do come back with a site plan, we will be requesting that they put together a study to show the amount of impervious surface that they're proposing versus what's already there and existing. We have already been in negotiations and discussions with them that when they do the parking lot to the south, the expectations from the city are they're going to increase the amount of green space that's there. It's already lacking in green space on that parking lot. And we also have already been in discussions with them that they will need to be doing. The city's going to be expecting best management practices. So what that means is the expectation is they will be doing to do some improvements to improve the quality of water that goes into Turkey Creek. So that'll be, as I mentioned earlier, the next step when we do the site plan.
Scott? That answered my questions. I was just trying to reference some questions that were asked through an email, and I think that did it right there. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question before I make mine? No. I'm probably referencing the same email that Scott got. I'm curious, just to clear this up, when we have the intersection signalized, there was some concern about the private drive having green lights much of the day. And I think the issue is they're going to have a green light every time that 55th Street has a green light. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, they'll be have a green light every time 55th is. However, the private drive, it's going to be radar detection. So the private drive, it's not going to, the only way the private drive will cause the 55th to go green is if there's actually a vehicle there.
Okay, and that's kind of why I was going to ask the question, because right now, I mean, I haven't set up there and watched the intersection. There's enough traffic up there. It seems to run on a cycle. You know, Merriam Drive gets it so long, and 55th Street gets it so long, and so on. I don't know if that changes at night. Maybe it does. Obviously, 55th Street's going to be going to have the right of way in terms of green light usage. Are you saying it then converts at some point to radar, or is it just on that, just for the Kincaid side? It's red until somebody shows up, and then it follows 55th Street green light cycle. So
we've been working a lot with Mr. McDonald from Public Works with this as well, if he wants to jump in and help on that. But in working with Public Works, it has been set up so they're going to do radar detection. It's going to be radar detection for the whole intersection. And again, the private drive will only cause their light to go green. The 55th light to go green is when there is a vehicle that is coming out of the private drive.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
I just added Jim McDonald as a panelist if
Oh.
you have anything to add into that.
Jim?
The only thing I would have is, Brian, that is correct. We are adding radar detection. The only thing that we may do is increase detection in the morning, or increase times in the morning when the buses are leaving, and then increase times in the afternoon when they're coming back. So the traffic will flow a little bit better and relieve some of that traffic that does back up on Merriam Drive.
That sounds good. And I can tell you from driving down there, the buses, you don't want to be down there when the buses are going back to their home, because you just wait and wait and wait. So this should help. I'm glad that they're doing it. Okay.
Just one more thing, that the Kincaid group, their representative, Jay Longhauser and stuff, they are also attending this as well. So if there's any questions for them, they're here as well.
Okay. Well, does everybody feel like their questions were answered on this? Okay.
Mayor, I have one quick question. This is Jason Silvers.
Got you, Chris. You're next. Go ahead, Jason.
So if the radar is being used for buses that are queued to leave their parking lot, if there's 15 buses, will the light stay green for all 15 buses? Does it take hierarchy?
I think that's what Mr. McDonald's explained, that we change the timing depending on the time of day to allow, again, so say I'm making an assumption, and in the morning, a lot of the buses would be wanting to get out. So the timing this timing on the signal will be modified so that in the morning it'll be a longer green to let the queuing of the buses get out.
Right, but does it allow for every bus that's leaving to get out until the light turns red, or is it on a cycle?
I believe it's on a cycle. If I'm wrong, we'll let Jim can jump in and correct me.
It will be a certain amount of time, and again, we may have to adjust it the longer we see how it's going. With our traffic engineers to look into that, but it'll be a certain amount of time. It won't be all 15 buses. It might be just 4 or 5. Just depends how long that time is.
Thank you.
Christine?
Just curious, will you be having these folks work with Merriam Drainage Board about the drainage issues going into the creek? And is that later with the site plan, or are they already on board?
More about the drainage, as you all are very familiar with. Some of you are more familiar than others. The stormwater ordinance, our stormwater ordinances, just like all other stormwater ordinances, give the ability, if you are very close to the floodplain, which this is, to allow the water to get to the creek sooner than later. Because obviously, detention of water causes, when it releases from that detention pond, it a lot of times gets to the creek at the same time as the flood headwaters do, which increases the flooding. So most of the time, the situations like this, it is more advantageous for the water to get there quicker rather than later.
And I understand that concept. What my question is the Merriam Drainage District Board on board with this?
We've been involved with them somewhat, but again, it won't be at the site plan stage. This is still a minor change. It's when we get to the site plan stage for the southern parking lot, that's when for sure we will be letting them know about it. And we send them just a little bit more about our procedures, any kind of site plan that we get in that goes to Planning Commission, we send out to all the utilities, and one of the folks to get it is the Merriam Drainage District.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Let's see, if there's no other questions, I'll accept the motion for this item. Please state your name when you make the motion, and second. The city clerk will take the roll call vote. Bob?
Yeah, this is Bob Pape, and Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that the City Council approve the Kincaid Group DS Bus Lines Development Agreement and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement.
I second it.
Who seconded?
Oh, sorry, Jason.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Pape,
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers,
Aye.
Councilmember Yodridge,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold,
Aye.
Councilmember Hands,
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell,
Aye.
Councilmember Nat.
Aye.
Very good. Okay. No further items on my list other than staff items. Chris, are there any staff items you'd like to discuss this evening?
Just give council an update. First, I would like to thank the council for their support for the last month. I know it's been a while since we've all been together, and some things have changed. We've had to cancel some events, and we've changed our operations. So I do appreciate all of your support and your support tonight calling in. This is clearly a new frontier for many of us that we're gathering like this, but it seems to have worked pretty well so far. So I appreciate you working with staff over the last few weeks. I did want to give a shout out to our staff. I mean, our staff has done extraordinary effort, put extraordinary effort in during these extraordinary times. They're continuing to work from home and in their places of work on our AB shifts. Again, we've had to cancel some events, but I think that they've, for the most part, done a really, really good job managing through, again, these crazy times. Special shout out to the police department, our public works, our communication staff. They're out there every day keeping the streets open, keeping people safe, and the communications team making sure that our residents have a resource and are not alone. They can always check out our updates, and I think the communications team's a really good really good package together on our website of resources that our residents need more now than ever. So I do want to thank those particular areas of our operations. But again, thank you to council for all your support. I know it has not been easy or normal. It hasn't been easy or normal for us either, but I do appreciate everyone's support. So thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I would just like to make a comment. This is Whitney Yodridge. Thank you. The police department doing the lights and sirens for kids' birthdays has been adorable. There have been a few of my neighborhood so far. Looking forward to mine on the 21st, by the way. But I would also like to thank the increase in neighborhood or next door and ring alerts asking why there are 10 police SUVs parked on the side of the street with their lights and sirens on as well. So that's been really cute. A little girl in my neighborhood had one the other day, and it was precious to see her out there like enjoying something. So thank you guys for that.
Looks like Jason's hand is up as well, if you can't see.
Jason?
This is Jason Silvers. Maybe I missed it, but did we skip the community center update?
It's included as a packet item.
So we're not discussing it. Okay, thank you.
I think Bob was up and Chris is up.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, my question was just, I've been staying away from City Hall. Is there anything in our council drawers as far as mail-wise that we should be picking up, or is it, I mean, I obviously just trying to stay away, but can that be delivered to us if there is, or usually there's nothing major in there, but I just have not gone in to get anything, so I didn't know how other council were handling that.
That is a great question, Bob. We will check and we will make a judgment call on if it's the regular trade rags or if it's something that you need. But that's a great point. We will take a look. I have not even thought about that.
Thank you.
I will make a note to say that Jenna reached out to everybody. This is typically the meeting that your new resident lists are distributed. If you want to send out packets to people, If you have a note or a letter that you want to include with those, we're happy to mail those on your behalf right now. So if you can just coordinate with Jenna on that, we can help you get those out during this season as well.
Good, thank you.
Very good. Christine?
Chris Hands here, and I reiterate what a great job everybody's doing. The communication's been superb. And then today I just randomly decided I'd go look at Parks and Rec's Facebook page. Oh my goodness, those folks have been so busy, and I'm going to be shoving on my outreach communications that I do, trying to get more people to go there. It really looked awesome. So thank you to them as well.
Very good. Anyone else? Okay. Is there any new business this evening? Mr. Engel?
I have none, no, sir.
Okay. There being no further business tonight, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Please state your name and you may close.
I second. This is
Motion
Whitney
made and
Aldrich.
seconded. Motion made and seconded. Madam Clerk.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Bob?
Yeah, I
Okay.
made one.
Thank you, and I have Whitney as the second.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
all in favor?
Aye.
Hey.
Good night.
Meeting's
Good night.
Bye.
Good night, all.